I'm so interested if AFL was so prevalent on the TV screens of kids growing up in the 70s and 80s, why it has not grown into the main sport in these states.
There isn't a person in Sydney, unless they are a GWS diehard fan, no one knows them. They're anonymous.
I knew there was a team coming in from PNG, but is that going to work? I mean, what does that do for the TV rights?
Why do they go and they love, and it's brutal Melbourne winter?
It's an easy answer, isn't it? Because it's a better sport.
Welcome to Cracking the Codes. It's our first episode of this 9 podcast where myself, Neil Breen from Channel 9 in Sydney, and my colleague from Melbourne, Tom Morris, we're going to cut through all the issues between the two codes. Are they at war? Have they ever been at war? It's a battle for supremacy. AFL's been trying to get into the league states for years. League's been trying to get into the AFL states. It's something that never ends. I personally don't think it will ever end. Tom, will it ever end?
Breenie, it's good to be here with you. I can see on our table at the moment we've got a Sharon.
Yep.
And whatever that is.
No, that's a Steeden.
It's a Steeden.
Now, there's a difference between the codes because the AFL community and supporters, they'll call the footy the Sharon.
Yeah.
They love the fact it's a Sharon. Rugby league, they don't call it a Steeden or a Gilbert or anything. It's just a footy.
It's just a footy.
It's just a footy, mate.
Hey, it's good to be with you. I've got to confess from the very start, I'm not a rugby league fan. So I don't particularly love the sport.
You don't really like it?
I watch the grand final every year.
Yeah.
And I see the odd Melbourne Storm game in Melbourne, but I'll never sit down and watch it. So this is going to be a good conversation because I will tell you exactly what I think.
Just raw. Give it to me raw. What do you think about rugby league? You know,
well, they're incredible athletes.
Your background, you were born and bred where?
In Melbourne.
In Melbourne. So you're an AFL guy.
I'm an AFL guy. And even when the Melbourne Storm were at the peak of their powers,
Yep.
I wasn't particularly into it. But I love sport. So I love soccer, cricket, AFL, Aussie rules football. I like American sports as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not... to me, rugby league is a bit like basketball in that I respect the athleticism of the players and they are amazing athletes and sports people. But when I sit down and watch a game, and I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast, I'm generally just not that entertained by the sport. That is how I see it.
That's how you see it.
That's how I see it.
Because AFL's your sport.
But that's not discounting what the players can do. That's just my view on what I'm watching.
Well, they're amazing. The players in both sports are amazing.
Yeah. So, what about you with our sport?
Well, my background is I was born and bred in Brisbane, and rugby league and rugby union were key parts of my life. I played rugby union because I went to a rugby union high school.
What position?
I played halfback at school and the inside centre after school. I played a lot of club rugby after I finished school. But I always loved league better. I like the ball in the hand. Rugby's more tactical, you got to keep the ball and you only get one tackle, so you've got to feed the ball back and there's a lot of kicking and all that sort of stuff. That's fine. I love the fact in rugby league the ball was in the hands. But one thing that people who are AFL fans, Victorians, South Australians, West Australians, Tasmanians, don't understand about AFL in the league states is when I was a kid in the 70s, growing up at Greenslopes in Brisbane and in the 80s, AFL was on television every Saturday and Sunday live on Channel 7.
Was it really?
Live, every Saturday and Sunday.
The VFL?
The VFL. I could watch Essendon and Collingwood and Carlton and Richmond and Footscray and Fitzroy.
And did you?
Yeah, I did. I watched a lot of it. I was very familiar with it. There was no way I would have ever missed a grand final.
Right.
And rugby league wasn't broadcast live. They used to replay the big games, match of the day at 6 o'clock at night, either on the ABC and then Channel 10 came along. And even the local competition in Brisbane was broadcast live.
Is that right?
Maine and Cooperoo and all of these teams, where Jason Dunstall first started at Cooperoo as a kid, they were all broadcast live as well, not so much anymore. So AFL, I feel as though AFL was more familiar to Queenslanders and New South Walesmen, who were a keen sports fan like I was as a kid, than league was in the southern states. You know what I mean? We had an introduction, a taste of it.
So I'm so interested if AFL was so prevalent on the TV screens of kids growing up in the 70s and 80s, why it has not grown into the main sport in these states. Like that's 30, 40 years ago.
I know. Okay, the difference was no one played it. Yeah. So the school I went to, Brisbane State High School, it's produced the second most amount of wallabies of any school in Australia, behind the famous Sydney rugby nursery, St Joseph's College, Sydney. It's a bit of a little-known stat about State High. There was one kid I went to school with, Fraser McLaughlin, who ended on going to play first grade, and he had a very minor contract with the Lions for a time, or the Bears, as it was at the time. He was the only kid who played AFL.
Yeah, right.
Kid, no one played it. but you might have watched it. But then at school and in your club thing, kids just played rugby union and rugby league.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's a lot bigger now than it used to be.
That's fascinating. So what is I've just told you what my relationship with league is. What's your relationship with Aussie rules?
I love Australian football.
Yeah.
I can't say that I watch all the games every weekend. There is no way I'll miss a score. I'll always check the scores on who's winning and who's losing. The problem is when you're working in rugby league like I am on 2GB on Sunday afternoons on the continuous call team, and you end up watching all the league games because you kind of have to for your job. But secondly, it's my favourite one.
Yeah.
But, I bought a house at East Brisbane right near the Gabba.
Yeah.
My first house I bought more than 30 years ago when I was in my early 20s. And on Sunday, the Bears used to play always on Sunday afternoons. And so I would always buy a ticket to sit on the old Gabba Hill. And there was a mate of mine and I and his now wife, and we'd go, the Bears are playing Sunday. I might have played rugby on Saturday, and then on Sunday I've gone to the Bears. And that was in the era where, firstly, I remember how much the tickets cost, $10.50. We used to pay $10.50, get in and sit on the hill. Roger Merritt was there.
Yeah.
But what happened in those years was Nathan Buckley turned up for a year.
Yes, he did.
So that was
played very well, won the Rising Star.
Oh, you could tell he was. You could tell he was a gun.
But he didn't want to be there.
He didn't want to be there, but he was honest about it.
Yeah.
I never forget. He turned up at the Bears, said, "Hey, I'm here for a year because I have to be.
Yeah.
But I'll give you everything I got, and then I'm off."
That's exactly what happened.
That's all right.
Yeah.
He can do that.
Which is actually just a bit. That's a bit like a rugby league mentality, isn't it?
Yeah.
He knew he was going, but he turns up and he plays.
We're going to get in. We're going to get into that. But I'll tell you two things that happened to me watching that really. And I'd watched a lot of AFL, but there were two things that happened. I can't remember. I think I remember the score. I think Geelong beat the Bears won 4 games one of those years, but Geelong beat them like 127, 126 one Sunday afternoon, and Ablett kicked like 11.
Yeah, okay.
And I just was sitting there watching this bloke. Yeah. And that was the day I truly understood that what I was watching at the ground was different to what I was seeing on TV.
Yep.
Because I started to get fixated with his positional play.
Yes.
And leading out.
Were you behind the goals or where were you?
I was behind the goals.
Yeah, okay.
Right, behind the goals. Merritt couldn't match it with him when he'd come down to
no one could. No one could when Ablett was on his way.
And there was another Sunday where another bloke did the same thing and destroyed the Bears, and I remember all these girls had number 6 signs. It was Tony Modra.
Oh, of course they did. What, playing for the Crows?
He was playing for the Crows.
Yeah, because he went to Freo after that.
It was real early doors.
Modra was unbelievable.
Yeah, for a period there.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
So you have the capacity in your life to be interested in Australian football and obviously into league.
Without a doubt.
Interesting.
And I think that, like a lot of people in Queensland and New South Wales, will still call it aerial ping pong and they'll bag it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they're not that interested. But there's a lot who are.
Yeah.
Like they'll take it in. Like my wife's interested in the Swans.
Yeah, right.
She wants to know if they're winning and losing.
Despite the fact they've lost 4 grand finals from the last 4 attempts.
No, well, that's all right.
Yeah, it's fine.
At least they made it to them.
It's true. It's just fascinating to me because I think the appetite for rugby league in Melbourne, well, I don't know, tell me, it feels like it's less than what the appetite is for AFL.
I think that's correct. And I think I'd have to definitely concede that point in the rivalry between the codes. AFL is certainly bigger to an extent in the league states than league is in the southern states.
Is that the governing body's fault, or why has league not had a stronger foothold in Melbourne? I mean, the great Billy Slater, Cooper, like Cameron Smith, Craig Bellamy, some of the greats of the game have come out of the Melbourne Storm, but they could walk down the street and they wouldn't get recognised in Melbourne, except for us ardent sport fans.
And that's astonishing considering what they did. But I compare that a little bit to the great Brisbane Lions era of 01, 02 and 03 in Brisbane when I was the sports editor of the Courier-Mail, and the great Damien Barrett was our AFL writer.
Yes.
He'd come up from Melbourne.
Did he break some stories, did he?
Yeah. And there was a few dramas along the way.
I remember there was a drama around Ackermanis with him. Ackermanis and Lee Matthews fell out. Anyway, that's for another podcast.
But I could tell you all about that because Lee rang me and goes, Acker's column's out of the paper.
That's right.
Yeah, because he went on Triple M on a Saturday morning, and he said that if Wayne Carey came to the Lions, he'd leave because he didn't want a bloke like that playing in his team.
In about 02.
And then Lee Matthews came out and said, I decide who plays here.
Yeah. Acker.
And Acker just turns up and plays. But anyway, we could go on and on about those stories. But so in those years, so the Lions became the flavour of the month. So the Broncos won those premierships 92, 93, 97, 98, 2000. And then the Lions go 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
And
playoff in 04.
Yeah, and they lost in 04, and that was Alistair Lynch's last game when he decided he'd go out in a blaze of glory and take everyone's head off.
He did.
But everyone went, well, that's it. That's it. The Lions are going to be. And to an extent, they still are. But they've never really gotten any bigger. Like, they fill the Gabba out.
Yep.
But if the Gabba was 60 or 70 or 80,000 seats, they wouldn't fill that out.
So you're going to reach the cap almost.
Yes, I truly believe that.
Yeah, right.
It's almost capped out. And then the AFL never gave up. It said, you know what, we're going all in with the Suns. And in Sydney, it wasn't satisfied with... I can tell you the hottest ticket in Sydney last year, because I'm a member at the SCG Trust, right, where I can go to Allianz, or I'm a private member, not a media member. My wife and I got a membership.
You pay for a ticket?
Yeah, got to pay for the tickets.
The only journalist I've ever met that pays for a ticket.
You can use the gyms and all that sort of too, so my family likes it. But we go to the Sydney FC games, we'll go to Waratahs games, Roosters games.
It's a great
Swans.
little complex.
Yeah, it's a great area, and you can do all that. But last year, the hottest ticket in town was the Swans.
Yeah, because the way they were playing.
Yeah, and there were warnings going out to members during the week saying membership's going to be capped. You know, some members have 4 tickets. Your 2 spare tickets, you can't use them.
Yeah.
And then my level of membership for this game coming up and that game coming up, if you want to go, you're going to have to pay an extra $20 or whatever. You could not.
So the Swans were hot.
Hot as. And they were full. But the AFL's obviously never been happy with that and brings in GWS. Now, GWS, there isn't a person in Sydney, unless they are a GWS diehard fan who liked AFL and lived in the suburbs of Sydney all their life, but they're just an AFL person. No one knows them. They're anonymous.
Is that because they're geographically
Not
out of the
really.
way?
The geography in Sydney, you know...
They're a bit out. They are a bit out, though. They are
a bit out. They're at Homebush. But, you know, geography in Sydney doesn't matter in rugby league. Yeah. You know, there's Penrith and there's Manly and there's Cronulla. It's spread far and wide. I don't think it's so much geography. It could be. It could be. But I just don't think there's the interest for 2 teams. There's the interest for one. Like, where people will go, we got our AFL team, it's the Swans.
Yeah. But the AFL would argue, and time will tell whether this is true or not, is that it's a generational thing. So they'd say, we don't really care if people are interested now or in 10 years. We want people to be interested in 2050 in the Giants. It's the kids who are growing up now, or even the kids that aren't born yet, they're going to be into the Giants. And it's an area, that's an area, the Giants, region, which loves sport. But it's so fragmented, isn't it? Because soccer's big there as well.
Soccer's big.
And we don't have a soccer person here. But soccer's an issue.
Soccer is the biggest problem for all the codes.
Because it's a simple sport.
Because of kids.
Yeah, it's easy to play.
So I played rugby all my life. What sport does my kid play?
Soccer. Yeah. I played soccer as a kid.
And he loves it. Oh, did you?
Yeah. And I loved it as well because there's a reason it's the world game because it's a simple sport. Anyone can kick a ball. But the Giants, I agree, haven't quite captured that market. But does that mean you throw the towel in? No, you got to keep.
Well, they can't now. You can't invest hundreds of millions in the Suns. And look, we'll do the Gold Coast as a topic, not just the Gold Coast Suns, but the Gold Coast Titans and sport on the Gold Coast as a topic in a separate episode.
That's worth a double episode.
Oh, mate.
It's a disaster.
It's almost impossible to get your head around. But see, this is when you're talking about those things. This is one of the reasons why the NRL's now keen to get back into Perth. They had a crack there at Perth and Adelaide, and it was in the Super League era, and the game was blowing itself apart at that time. That was one of the reasons why the Lions became a big ticket item, because rugby league was still a bit on the nose post the Super League war of the mid to late 90s, and it didn't work. So they want to go back there, but Peter V'landys, the chairman of the ARL, he wants them to pay big money. You know, he loves cash, which is why he's accepted the $600 million over 10 years for a team in PNG from the federal government. Yes. Why rugby league wants to get involved
When's
in
that coming in?
Politics? 2028.
Right.
We don't have a draft, so they get no concessions.
So there's a team. I knew there was a team coming in from PNG, but is that going to work? I mean, what does that do for the TV rights?
Well, the TV rights, it gives them a 9th game.
Okay.
It gives them a 9th game, which is what the AFL's got. So
and will be made up of people from Papua New Guinea?
They'll try and have a couple.
They're expanding. I mean, both codes are trying to expand.
The PNG, well, I'm writing it down as a topic for 1 week just so we can explain to AFL audience that's listening. PNG is actually about China, which I think is really sad.
Well, tell me how.
I'll tell you really quickly.
Yeah.
Right? The federal government wants to block China from building ports and doing all of these developments and giving money to the Pacific nations, which China has been doing tactically through Samoa and all these countries. And the federal government wanted to block them out of PNG. In PNG, they love rugby league like eyes roll in the back of the head fans of rugby
like
league.
India cricket sort of stuff.
Fanaticism.
Yeah.
And so they've had a team playing in the Queensland competition, the 2nd-tier competition. And so the federal government had this idea through the Papua New Guinea government that if the federal government funds it $600 million taxpayer dollars over 10 years to put a team in Papua New Guinea, and the Papua New Guinea government is going to let players live there tax-free. Right, so if you're earning $800,000 in your contract, you're getting $800,000.
Every last cent.
Every last bean.
Yeah.
And they're going to spend $150 million on a commune for the players and their families to live in for safety reasons.
Like a little society.
Like
a gated community almost.
I find it to be one of the most bizarre things ever.
That is so weird.
But
Peter V'landys is unashamedly ambitious.
And loves money.
And brash, isn't he?
100%. And you know what? You can't bag him because he goes, I'm going to do this Everest thing. And I remember going, what's he talking about? It'll be on Caulfield Cup Day or something. Anyway, he did it. Amazing.
But that's NRL for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like let's go outside the square and be completely different. Now, the AFL almost tries, but I feel like the AFL in this sense is almost like a nerd. Whereas the NRL is the wild kid at school that no one can control, but it sort of works.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like the AFL had those cracks at Shanghai and went to New Zealand and those things overseas.
Wellington, China. I mean, they were looking at the US before COVID hit, but none of it worked.
It was all
New Zealand didn't work. The climate doesn't work over there for
Shanghai was
China
was watching the
weird.
games. It just was like, what's going on
Also,
there?
Port Adelaide playing Gold Coast in China.
Yeah, it's like,
no one's travelling over there to watch that.
Yeah, because they didn't back themselves with the big sides.
That's right. Yeah, but also like there's areas in Australia which love footy, like Darwin, but the climate doesn't suit playing it there. Or even Alice Springs, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And that's real footy territory as well as it is probably rugby league territory as well. So it's really the heartland is Melbourne with Adelaide and Perth, whereas your heartland is Sydney
and Brisbane.
Yep. But not really Melbourne and not really Adelaide or Perth or Hobart, is it? Like
no.
you're a two-city sport.
And stretching right up the Queensland
coast
and all through New South Wales. And obviously the Warriors is important to the NRL in New Zealand. The problem is they've got all the talent in the world, but they can't. They've made 2 grand finals. They can't win one.
Yeah.
You know, and they've always got to compete with the All Blacks. So I suppose as we sort of get to the end of this first segment, Tom, I think we both agree that the codes are going to keep pushing expansion. They're going to keep driving into the other states. And I can't see, in my lifetime, I'm 56, I think when I depart this earth, the status quo is still going to be the status quo.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yes. The expansion, I think, is somewhat about the legacy of the leader at the time. So Gil McLachlan wants to expand into Tasmania because he wants to leave the game and go, look at me, I set up Tasmania.
I set up Tasmania.
And I think probably Peter V'landys is a bit the same. I mean, you can always say you're doing it for the greater good, but you're doing it for your legacy. You want people to look back and go, wasn't that leader amazing and a visionary?
Yeah.
And you're right, they're all trying to move outwards, but they're all at the very core of it all, you know, it's important to have eyeballs on TV and crowd numbers, but they need kids playing the sport.
Yeah.
They'd have to have kids playing the sport. And there are concerns in Sydney about kids not playing our sport and in Brisbane about kids not playing our sport.
And there should be. And there's concerns in Sydney and Brisbane about kids, you know, not playing rugby league.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, I have to say that in households, the mums have got a lot to do with that.
In what way?
Oh, well, mums love their kids playing soccer.
Well, because it's not as
It's just
not as brutal.
It's not as brutal. It's a lot more gentle.
Yeah, well, there's less
my
concussions
boys
in
played
soccer.
both. My young boys played both of those. Played rugby league, rugby union, and everything. But he wasn't physical.
Yeah.
And he get belted. Then he plays soccer and he's fast and he runs around them. And I'm happy with that. And a lot of kids will just continue to do that.
But Breenie, it seems like you are more au fait with AFL than what I am with rugby league.
And I reckon that's almost standard.
Yeah, which is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I reckon that is standard, where you got a mad sportsman like yourself from Melbourne, and you got a mad sports person myself from Brisbane/Sydney.
I'm ambivalent. I'm not against it. I'm just not. I'm not into it.
That person will have a little bit more touch with AFL. Like my friends in Brisbane, if I said, "Hey, why don't we all go to the Lions?" They'd go, "Oh yeah, no worries.
Let's do it."
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
You wouldn't get any.
So does that mean our sport's better than yours? Because we've got more of these.
I don't know. We're not going to
fans.
start arguing better, are we?
We're not going to talk about that.
Mate, I'll absolutely start blowing up. Now, as we wind up this first episode, in the next episode, I think people will really enjoy it. You and I are going to ask questions of each other that baffle us, right? We're going to save them up.
More specific questions, yeah.
Do you want to do a teaser?
No, I think it's just more about the way the game is played.
Because I've still got I got questions.
I got more for you as well.
And because you've been writing them down before this first episode. I got questions, but one I'm going to sort of start with one.
Okay.
I think I understand it, but I want you to explain it.
This is a teaser.
A teaser. Why does the AFL in 2024 average 38,344 fans a match? And the NRL only pulls 20,605. Why do they go and they love, and it's brutal Melbourne winter, and I look up my weather app and I go, it's 5 degrees in Melbourne, and they're just going bananas.
It's an easy answer, isn't it? Because it's a better sport. It's better to watch live. I mean, what do you think? I mean, the crowd numbers dwarf the NRL numbers.
I think AFL's better to watch live, not because it's a better sport. Because it's better to watch live because you learn things like I learned that day when I watched Ablett.
The intricacies of it.
You can see, because the field's so big.
Yeah.
So rugby league is better on TV. See, this was going to be my answer.
Yeah,
rugby league's better on TV because it's linear.
Yep.
It's lines of blokes.
You're right, it is
running
easy to
up,
watch.
bang, running. And the camera can follow them down and it can follow them back up the field. And you can see in a line across your TV screen what they're passing it out the back line now. You know?
Yeah.
Halfback,
I can see that.
Centre, fullback comes into the line, tries to take on two men, put the winger away or whatever. And in AFL, you're watching the player scrapping around a ball and the bloke makes the and he puts a big bomb downtown. I go, where's he kicking it to? Oh, there was a bloke there.
Yeah.
Because that bloke comes into the screen. When I go to the ground, I go, wow, I can see.
It's a bit like NRL's like soccer. Like it's a linear game, but
yeah, soccer's the same on TV, up
back
and
forth.
the field.
And basketball's a bit the same as well, although it is 360 degrees. It's just on a court, so it's easy to film. Footy is hard to film like that. AFL is hard to film. The other thing is, what's the biggest home and away? Do you use the term home and away?
Yeah.
What's the biggest home and away crowd you'd have for the season in NRL, and where would that be?
It'll always be at Suncorp Stadium for a Broncos game.
And how many people would that?
50 plus.
That's what I'm saying. So
because that's the size of the Suncorp.
That's right. So the numbers are slightly skewed by the fact that on Anzac Day we get 100,000, Essendon and Collingwood.
Yeah.
And Collingwood and Geelong.
Yeah, because you get the big
100,000.
you got the big MCG crowd. Whereas
that's right. So the biggest crowds, and also Adelaide Oval, Marvel Stadium, they're 50,000. The new Perth Stadium's 50,000. So we've got a lot of stadiums that can fit as much as Suncorp. So that would make the crowds, clearly favour the AFL. It's a good question. I've got more for you, but we should do it in the second show.
Yeah, for sure and certain. And because one of the other things we'll do in a future episode is talk about why the AFL teams all play at 2 stadiums in Melbourne and why the rugby league teams play at 10 stadiums in Sydney.
Good question.
Because that's something that absolutely stuffs our crowd numbers overall. Okay, that's it for the first episode of Cracking the Codes with Neil Breen from Channel 9 in Sydney, Tom Morris from Channel 9 in Melbourne. In our next episode, we're going to be peppering each other with questions, and I can tell you, Tom, your answers are want to be good.